All right, so did you get it? How'd it go? Were you able to write some code that outputted the average trip cost? How'd you do it? Okay. Here's how I imagine some of you may have done it, and it would make sense to do it this way. Okay. Let me go ahead and fire up my live server. Go ahead and load 13. Good. I have this. So, how could I have done this? Could I have written another function like this function, but iterated over the trip cost? Sure, I could, right? I could have taken this function. I could have said instead of calculate, and by the way, this is giving us an error because it's no longer, this would be trip cost, right? And instead of total MPG, it'd be total trip cost, right? Instead of the length of that, it could be my trip cost, right? So we could update it. So we could go through and update this and update all that. That's a fine way to do it. Okay. If you did that approach and you got working code, great. Okay. All you'd had to have done is called that next function. Here's the approach I would have taken. You already have everything you need in place here. And a couple of reasons. These arrays are the same length, okay? And instead of just calculating MPG, let's just change this to something a little more generic that says calculate average. And then in here, let's do sum. Let me get off caps. Let's set the sum, okay? Now, I can use whichever array length because they're the same to control the loop itself, okay? I'm going to do sum, okay? Now, if I do sum here, I'll show you where we might want to update that as well. Okay. So because I'm only having one sum and I want sum for both of them, I could actually pull this out into its own function and call it with that array. It's another way I could have done it. But let's say sum of MPG. Okay. MPG. MPG. Okay. And then what I could do is set the variable for let sum of trip cost equals 0. And then I could have that same concept of sum trip cost equal. And by the way, there's a shorthand way to do this line. I'll show you to you next time. Let's do sum of whatever that value is plus, and in this case, it'd be my trip cost referencing the index I that's looping over. And now instead of, and it's still average MPG, but in this case, we could say sum of MPG. Okay, we could take this line, just copy it. And instead of that, we'd say, and actually we could use constant there, trip cost. So we're going to do take the sum of trip cost. And in this case, my trip cost. Make sure I'm doing that right. Now that references the array. This is the value we've set up here. And now average, so we could have two lines here. We could do it all in one line if we wanted, but I could say, so average trip cost, in this case, average trip cost. Now the question would be, is this better? Well, it's utilizing, instead of writing two different loops, you're only looping through it once. So that's more efficient to begin with, which is good. Okay. So let's just make sure the thing runs. Oh, let's see, we've got an error. It's always fun. Let's see where the source was. Calculate MPG. Oh yeah. So now what has to change is we got to change instead of just calculate average, right? So it makes that function more scalable. Okay. We could also, and I think this would be kind of the next step I would do to this, is I would then just pass in, I would then take the parts of this that I could call and pass in, or not pass, or reference an array, would be the other way I would do this to make this even more modular. because you don't want a lot. You want simple inputs. Now, in this case, the average is not having inputs. That's actually something we could change. In fact, we could, again, this is part of programming where you iterate over things and you write something and then you realize, you know what, I can write that better. Let me, since we were here and it's bugging me, let's do math.round here. It's also what happens is things bug you and you have to fix them. Well, you don't have to. I do because it bugs me that they don't come out the way I want. And there's another method called floor. I should talk about that. That actually would be a good method to talk about. But I think these give you at least the basic concepts, right? All right. So let's see. Let's go back and look at where we're at, right? We've done two videos, two assignments, right? So this will end up being so for this, right? I want you to, if you had them, if you know, if you got working code and you just looked at my example, cool, right? But if you modified it, regardless, probably do a little bit more coding here, and then give me as your submission for this assignment your commit history, which would include all the coding we've done to date. Okay, I'm going to give this some thought whether we end here or whether I end up doing kind of the next logical stage here where instead of running this, we actually get input from the user. I wish I was. Oh, you know what? This would be a good one for Discord if you're on there. I have a couple of students out on Discord if you're interested in joining the tutors, or there's at least one of them out there as well. Okay, I think I'll leave this for this week then. So this instead of because I these videos were a little bit longer for this week for the assignment. Oh, I think what I will do here, right, is I went through because there are other loops, and maybe that's what I could do is just talk about other loops. Okay, thinking out loud. You'll see when you get here if I add another one. But for sure, you're going to submit this one. Okay, so this is now you're ready to submit this one once you've finished up this work.